Do you recall that famous scene from the movie The Network? It was fantastic. It's the scene where Howard Beale says, "I want you to go to the window, open it, stick your head out and yell, 'I'm as mad as hell and I'm not going to take this anymore.'" Well, I have to say that's exactly how I feel, and I reckon many of you do too. And that's why I'm asking whether federation and our political system is failing us. You know, I'm sick of feeling powerless about questionable political decisions, profligate spending and short-term vision, where highly paid ministers and public servants suddenly develop amnesia when they're asked to account for their actions, where billions of dollars are being spent on the not bloody necessary NBN, Stephen, artists who live stream insemination sessions, diesel submarines that will be superseded by the time they're built, cycleways to nowhere in congested narrow streets, migration levels without the infrastructure to support them. And I'm powerless that our fundamental right of free speech has been eroded and that our human rights have been taken away by dictatorial decisions like the extreme lockdowns in Victoria and the bloody-minded border closures. Livid when we hear of determinations by the justice system that give murderers and paedophiles a slap on the wrist, and illogical, expensive, wasteful decisions like spending millions on erecting a museum on a floodplain and moving a heritage building brick by brick when most people in the area would prefer a new hospital. You know, COVID's put the spotlight on how our democracy is functioning, its capabilities and its shortcomings, and the calibre of our political leaders in each state. And what we've come to understand is that our federal government is hamstrung when it comes to determining what happens in the states. It's very good for shoveling money at them, but when it comes to making decisions that will impact on the national interests, it's powerless unless it wants to withhold funds and pursue them in the High Court. And what of our politicians? You know, some like Gladys in New South Wales have shone during the pandemic, but others are revealing that their political interests outweigh any decision that may be good for their states' economies and the health and well-being of their people. Leaders who do not deserve to lead. I believe it's time to have a really serious discussion about what's wrong with our political system and what kind of constitutional change is needed to fix it. If our representative democracy is broken, what significant changes must be made to the process itself, and how do we better select and scrutinise the people putting themselves forward to represent us? So, do you want to join me at that window? So, Kai, we've got so many levels of government, you know, federal, state and territory and local. Do you think we're over-governed, that we have too much bureaucracy that's costing us too much and handicapping our national interests?
Look, I am not going to cast aspersions on the many good public servants that we have out there that are doing good work, but I think that, look, let's put it this way, I've never worked in politics, I probably never will. I'm just someone that goes through life. We recently did some renovations, had to deal with a local council, for example. I think most Australians would have had their share of bureaucratic nightmares, of red tape stories and so forth. And, you know, I think that it's fair to say that in many ways we do feel over-regulated. Australia, and look, I suppose also, look, I come from a partly Southeast Asian background, right? And I'll tell you what, like, there's a lot of faults with them, including vast corruption in some of those countries. But, gee, it's so easy to get a lot of stuff done sometimes as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, they have their share of red tape as well. But, I mean, even just something as simple as, you know, people talk about having street market, like having night markets in Sydney. You know, obviously this is pre-COVID, but, you know, just being able to do things like that, it's a lot more difficult in a place like Australia than it can be in many other countries. So, look, you know, is there a general overload of red tape in this country? Geez, I think it'd be hard to say there's many people who say there isn't, but it seems to be the case that's happened in a lot of countries, including the United States as well, for example.
Well, Stephen, you've been part of the system. Do you think that 4 years is too long or not long enough. We just don't seem to have the visionaries that we used to have. You know, the Bradfields. Where is a Bradfield that had the vision to build an 8-lane harbour bridge across Sydney Harbour? We just seem to have politicians who have their eye on the political calendar, and that's it, to make sure that they can get re-elected in 4 years.
Well, look, let me agree with your basic premise. We're overgoverned. We should abolish state governments and have a larger council structure, in my view. Just take that middle tier out, give a few more powers and a few more responsibilities to enlarged councils. Then you've got the feds and the enlarged councils. That's my personal view. I've held that view for a long time. Do I ever think it's achievable? No. 1988, I stood and had a vote cards in a referendum for a proposition that said, I believe in one vote, one value. It lost. If Australians won't vote for one vote, one value, I decided that day I was never going to spend 1 second of my political life spending my time bothering about constitutional reform. It is impossible to achieve. And so I fear, though I agree with you, Prue, that we're never going to see any significant change. For all everyone agreeing it's a great idea, nothing will ever happen, bearing in mind that the Liberal Party are the states' rights party. But on some of your other propositions, I can't really agree. I mean, I was attacked endlessly for putting forward a policy proposal that was going to take 10 years to complete. And you yourself, in your own intro to this section, bagged the National Broadband Network. Can you imagine
continue to do so.
If we were still... Well, I can't help the fact that you have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, that's
but can
debatable.
you imagine if we were trying? No, it's not.
Well, frankly,
even the Liberal Party have now agreed fibre to the premise is the only long-term solution. No more rubbish. I can't believe, Prue, you're on the same bandwagon as Malcolm Turnbull.
Oh, I'm never on the same bandwagon as him, but I'm telling you,
Malcolm Turnbull was against the National Broadband Network. Therefore, I know I should be supporting Conroy on this.
Can I just say, look at the people who are now working at home. We are all mobile. We don't necessarily... We want mobile technology that is going to allow us to work anywhere we want. We're on the train, we work, whatever. Having it to the home... We've moved on from that. We've got 5G coming, and we. No, well, I'm sorry, Stephen. Anyway, we're not talking. We're not here to talk about the NBN.
It's called the laws of physics.
Oh, let's not go there.
You raised it. You put it in your editorial.
Yeah, I know, and I knew I'd bait you about it. But I still think you're the person who actually wrote it. What, the whole business plan on a coaster? I mean, wow, how exciting is that? But let's get back to Michael and the issues that I've raised. I mean, to fix this, do you think that... I mean, I think a lot of people were surprised that the federal government was quite hamstrung when it came to dictating to the states.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you think that the Constitution, as Stephen said, is going to be very hard to change? But when we look at the whole system of preferential voting, or whether we have... what was I going to say? I've just lost my thing. But preferential voting, politicians with no real-world experiences, all of those things that we need to really, I think, have a really good look at what is, who's coming forward, what the process is, because we now have parties deciding who can be put forward.
Well, it's the weakness of our system, and I suppose the one thing that makes America, I think, exceptional isn't so much its land mass. We've got a similar land mass. It's their ability to innovate. And the reason they can innovate is they get the right people into the centre of the political arena, irrespective of whether they're the president or a actual elected representative. They can bring in the big boys from outside, the captains of industry, the Silicon Valley experts, bring them in and make them heads of department, basically, and drive the system. Whereas here we rely on someone who's probably got a law degree, generally speaking, and we say, well, you can go and become the technology minister. Well, they may never turn on a light switch in their life, heaven forbid. So, or you can be the sports minister and they wouldn't know what the difference between a football and a soccer ball. So, we have our weaknesses. But Stephen is quite right, as you are, regarding constitutional reform. It has to happen. Professor David Flint, who knows a lot about this, and I talk about it a lot.
Yes.
The problem is, of course, you're going to be relying on the very people who don't want it to happen to make it happen. That is the political class and the public service. Why would the turkeys vote for Christmas? Well, they wouldn't. And let's assume, as Stephen says, let's assume we abolish state government. That's the logical one of the three to go. We are over-governed. I mean, let's be honest. But, OK, you get rid of state government, then you're left with the police, elements of the health system, education system, all these national parks, all these things that state governments run. Now, someone's still going to have to administer them.
Yeah.
I'm not sure you're going to have an enormous slimming down of the public service to do it. They'll just stay in the same office. We'll have to spend a lot more money getting new badges and, you know, business cards made for them. But essentially, I don't think we'll say. But we need to try. I mean, as I said at the end of my editorial, there are billions, tens of billions every year that could be saved here per annum if we slim and streamline government. Why does the federal government have a Department of Indigenous Affairs?
That's crazy.
Every state government,
yes.
every second council's got some Indigenous, and same for arts.
Everywhere.
So, I mean, and of course all of this, it's all nice, but it's all money, and it's all coming out of your pocket, mine, Stevens and Kai's and everyone else's. We all pay council rates, state government taxes and federal government taxes. The same
but
people.
Michael, what about what Stephen said? He said, look, I tried for this. I was in there. I tried to push for it. And based on his experience, he says this is just never going to happen.
Yeah.
Is there a path to us? Like, is it, I mean, this is not the kind of reform that you're going to get that's triggered by a crisis, I think. It's something that it seems like you're just going to constantly chip away at. And I'm just not really sure how much chipping can really be done that would actually realistically get us on this case. I mean, it sounds like this entire panel agrees that we're overgoverned, especially in that federal-state way.
Well,
but
maybe
realistic is it?
look, maybe COVID, I mean, as we keep saying, COVID's been the circuit breaker for everything. I mean, maybe COVID's going to be the circuit breaker for common sense here. And it's the economic case. I mean, the hip pocket always talks. The economic case, if you get some decent people, some real leaders in politics together and say, well, listen, if we do this, we're going to save $15 billion a year, let's say, in wages, efficiencies and the rest. I mean, the average Australian will be thinking, heck, that's a lot of money. And it's money we don't have and it's money we need. And so if you get a bit of leadership, I mean, we must never forget, it wasn't just chance that Australia federated the way it did in 1901. I mean, we could have gone the way of South America, we could have gone the way of Africa. We didn't. We became a continental country. And that was because we had leaders that brought a lot of people together who otherwise wouldn't be able to have a drink in the room together, but they saw common sense and strength in that unity. And I think if we get a similar, as you said, Prue, leadership, I don't know where they are, but if we can get them, we've got a chance on this.
I don't know. Well, let's hope so. Otherwise, we're going to be frustrated for a hell of a long time.
They'd be voting for Christmas, as you said.
Well, we've